Your coordination compounds, like what we are going to study in this chapter, they all have coordination bonding. So what you already know, for example, if you take formation of ammonium ion, right? You know that ammonia, when it takes up hydrogen ion, okay, how does it do that? Because there is a lone pair of electron and hydrogen is devoid of any electron. Hydrogen ion is devoid of any electron. In aqueous solution where you have hydrogen ions, for example dilute solution of HCl, if you pass ammonia into that, what will happen is you will form ammonium chloride, and ammonium chloride means ammonium ions. So the way in which ammonium ions are formed, here the electron pair is just shared, where the pair of electron is entirely provided by nitrogen. Okay, and if you want to represent this bonding, we represent by arrow. Okay, okay, don't get confused between this arrow. This arrow means the arrow which represents the direction of reaction, but this arrow I am trying to represent in the formation of this ammonium ion here. Okay, where I am trying to represent the bonding from nitrogen to hydrogen in the form of covalent aspect. Okay, not entirely as ionic, because this is a neutral molecule and this is an ion. This is a recipient of electron where it is trying to create a duplet around it. Okay, in very simple term, it is trying to create a duplet around it, and nitrogen already has an octet around it, but it is still carrying a lone pair of electron which can be shared wherever necessary, and it does so with hydrogen ion to form ammonium ion. So in the formation of ammonium ion, actually speaking, which is like a positive ion, you have a coordinate bonding between nitrogen of ammonia and hydrogen ion. Okay, so this is an example which you know already. There are many compounds like this where you can where you have one of the entities providing the shared pair of electron for the formation of covalent bond, or in general a bond, and that kind of bond is referred to as generally in a very simple term as coordinate bond. But as I said that it need not be entirely covalent nature. Okay, see, coordinate covalent bond, generally it is written like that, but that doesn't mean a coordinate bond is always just the covalent bond. So we will see that little later. Fine. So in our syllabus, what we are going to study is coordination compounds. We are going to refer to coordination compounds, the compounds which carry coordinate bond. Ammonium ion by itself is not a compound, it's just an ion, right? It's a cation that is formed through covalent bonding, but this chapter deals with the formation of coordination compounds. Just to give you a few examples, if you already have seen them somewhere, the compounds like, for example, K4 FeCN6, cobalt, ammonia 6 Cl3. Okay, or you may have compound like nickel carbonyl. Okay, something like this. In all these compounds, if you look at, there is a central metal atom. I am directly introducing to you with few examples of coordination compounds where you will always find a metal at a central part, and to this metal you will have everything attached. Now how everything is attached, that's where is the key to discriminate them and call them as coordination compound. So we'll go slowly into this. Let me start. Okay, this is just to give a certain flavor about it. Okay, let me tell you a certain kind of simple experimentation that you can do in the laboratory by taking two solutions. For example, two solution of some ions. Okay, when you take two let's say, for example, you take solution A is a solution, right now I am referring aqueous solution of some salt. Okay, for example, okay, I'll come back to example. And there is another solution, let's say B, which is a solution of some other salt. Okay, so there are two solutions, and the salt, when I am referring to ionic species. Okay, when I am saying salt, I am referring to ionic compounds. Okay, so when you mix them, I will give you the example, don't worry right now. When you mix them, in certain stoichiometric proportion. See, this is important. In certain stoichiometric or metric proportion, okay, then what happens is you get a mixture. This is a mixture where you have A and B, some salt which are part of these solutions, and when you mix them in a certain stoichiometric proportion of the salts, then you get a mixture. From this mixture, now suppose you evaporate a solvent, right now let's say water, okay. In fact, let me tell you, if there is no interaction between the two salt and if their crystal structures are totally different, okay, if the crystal structures are totally different, you might even observe that one of the crystal may come out first, right? Because both have got different saturation point. Remember, this is your basics. You know, crystallization is also one of the ways in which you can separate out the two substances or two salt. By suppose you create a mixture, and suppose if the saturation point of one of the salt is lower, then it will come out of the solution first as crystal. Then slowly, once this is done, then other salt may also come out as crystal of its own. Okay? So you can separate the two different crystals or multiple crystals from a mixture of variety of salts. This is our common understanding. Fine. There is another scenario which I am going to discuss with respect to this chapter here. Out of this mixture, okay, after you have done the evaporation of this solvent, there is a possibility that some kind of compounds can be formed which are known as addition compounds. You will know it soon, don't worry about it. So here the situation will be, you will get only one kind of crystal. That used to happen only in a certain combination. That's why I said here, very important thing, a certain stoichiometry. If you have a random stoichiometry, it may not work and you may have two separate crystals. But if you have taken a certain specific stoichiometry, okay, I think I should say the stoichiometric proportion to refer to only this mixture. But here, this one can be understood as separate mixture. But if you have taken them in a certain stoichiometric proportion for a certain specific compound, you may get only one type of crystal, and that compounds are that compound may be referred to as addition compound. Now I will tell you with the example. There are scenarios in which even the addition compounds can be formed in two different scenarios. So scenario in one, I will take the example of, let's say, suppose if you have taken potassium sulfate and aluminum sulfate in 1:1 proportion, and if you prepare their mixture in water and then evaporate water, you get the crystal of K2SO4 Al2SO4 thrice 24H2O. So this is like a one crystal, and this crystal is famously known as, or this substance is famously known as alum, potass alum. So you get only one crystal. This kind of substance, when you put in water again, suppose, now I am saying that this is a crystal here, okay, this is after evaporation of water, okay. If you prepared the mixture, then you get this mixture here, evaporate water, you get here crystals of alum, okay. This is a mixture. Now there is another kind of case which is also possible if you have a specific compound. For example, you take solution of potassium cyanide, KCN, and you take solution of AgCN, which is not very highly soluble, but still you have a certain sparingly soluble amount of this, and there will be solution of this. Now what happens here? Here also I would say, let's say, mixture, and these are also in their aqueous solution. They lead to the formation of something different than this. You will get only one crystal even here, okay, and the compound I am representing here right now, let's say as KAgCN twice. I will analyze this for you, don't worry about this right now, but you get crystals of this. This is also after evaporation of water. So what you did in this experiment here, in this scenario, it is very clear. You take aqueous solution of this, and then simply mix them in a certain 1:1 proportion, evaporate water, you get only one substance, which is potash alum. Here also is the same thing. You take aqueous solution of this, evaporate water, you get a substance with only one type of crystal. Okay, so this is clear. What is the difference between this and this? The difference arises if you explore the properties. Suppose if you take alum again in a beaker and put it in water. Okay, you take alum, put it in water, or let's say solubilize in water, then you get all the ions separated. Remember, in original solution also, when you say aqueous solution of potassium sulfate, you have ions of potassium and sulfate. In the aqueous solution of aluminum sulfate, you have ions of aluminum and sulfate, right? It's not the substance by itself, but you have ions which are solubilized, right? Now, if you take this potassium or potash alum or alum in general and solubilize in water, again, this alum or crystal of alum loses its identity, and it gives the mixture of ions which are possible from it, which is potassium, aluminium 3+, and sulfate 2-. Of course, in the certain stoichiometric proportion, it is same as this one. In the mixture originally which you have taken, it also carried potassium ions, aluminium ions, and sulfate ions. Okay, and of course in water. So you get the same mixture. Please see, you started with a certain mixture where you started with two different salts, and you prepared their mixture. You get one crystal. Put that in water. You get again the ions like original, as if this alum has no identity of its own. It's like the same as you are taking the solution of original salts here. Okay, so how do you know that this is what is happening? Well, it is very easy to do that. You can identify by doing the confirmatory test of potassium ion, confirmatory test of aluminum, and confirmatory test of sulfate ion. And also, so both qualitative analysis, qualitative and quantitative matlab, like they will establish the proportion, in what proportion they are created here. For one potash alum, how many potassium ions you are supposed to get? 2 of that. How many sulfates you are supposed to get? 4 of that. And how many aluminum you are supposed to get? 2 of that. And that's what is the proportion originally was there. You had basically 2 potassium, you had 2 aluminum, okay, Al2S, yeah, and then you have 4 of sulfate. This is the original proportion. Here also you get the same proportion, 2 potassium, 2 aluminum, and then 4 of sulfate. So nothing is lost here. Please see, you get everything in the same solution, in the mixture again, and it is same composition as what you started with. So as if when you prepare the solution again, there is no specific identity of this alum. Okay, that's what I am trying to convey you. And you can establish this by both quantitative and qualitative analysis. This can be checked. The composition can be checked by quantitative and qualitative analysis. Let's do the same thing here. If you take this substance and if you put this again in water, solubilize in water, now you don't get all the ions. You get the ions like potassium, and you get one big ion which is AgCN twice minus. Only these 2 ions you get. Look at this composition. You started with original mixture which has composition in 2 different solutions here. They gave you 1 potassium and 1 Ag and then 2 CN, right? This was your original mixture in aqueous solution. But now when you intermediately you evaporated water, you get a certain crystal, only one type of crystal, and then when you solubilize this crystal again in water, but now you get only 2 type of ions. And how do you know this? You can establish this because you don't get test for cyanide which you used to get earlier in this case. You don't even get the test for silver ion separately which you used to get here. How do you know silver ions are present? You can treat with chloride, right? Cyanides you can treat with some iron salt, you will get the color. Okay, potassium can also be tested. So you get the test of only potassium ion, number 1, okay, here, and you get a test of one big ion, a specific test for this big ion, and they are found to be in 1:1 proportion, 1 potassium, 1 of this. That means they are balanced by the charge here. Now then the question arises, what kind of mechanism is responsible for the formation of this kind of crystal or this kind of substance, and is there anything that has got to do with the property of this substance? Because ultimately if this is what is happening here, that will change the property of this substance, and that property of this substance will be very unique. Okay, here you might have realized that this potassium alum, it loses identity in water. That means in water it does not have its own property as such completely. It has the same property as if you are taking the mixture of potassium sulfate and aluminum sulfate, while in this case this guy has got a completely different property than potassium cyanide alone and silver cyanide alone. That's the difference here. So and both were both the experiments were done in the similar manner. There must be something different happening here. Okay, now let me name these kind of different substances which are formed here as addition compound. The compound which are formed here, which can give you again back the original composition of the mixture, they are called as double salts. Double salt. So there is a formation of double salt happening here. It's a simple double salt. Okay, this one scenario is referring to the formation of double salt. The second scenario with a specific example is referring to formation of something called as coordinate, or in general they are also referred to as complex. They are basically they are complex, they are more complex, that's why. So coordinate or complex compounds. Okay, and here is something new that is coming to you, that is coordinate compound. We need to explore this. Okay, please try to understand this. How did I identify the presence of potassium, aluminum sulfate? By qualitative inorganic analysis. How did I know that they are in proportion of 2, 2 and 4? By quantitative analysis. You can take the original substance, or let's say create the original substance and try to find out that in one formula how many potassium, how many aluminum, how many sulfates are there. Quantitative analysis can be done in many ways. One simple way to do quantitative analysis is, which is you have already studied, and that is your conductivity measurement. The quantitative analysis can be done by using conductivity measurement. You remember the parameter lambda m0. For example, if you write here lambda m0 for, let's say, Al2SO4 thrice. If you want to write the formula for lambda m0, which is limiting molar conductivity for the aqueous solution of this Al2SO4 thrice, the limiting molar conductivity for aluminum sulfate can be written down as twice the limiting molar conductivity of aluminum ions, right? And then plus thrice the limiting molar conductivity of sulfate ions, right? So by doing the measurement of this, suppose if you know the measurement of this, you measurement of this, you can establish through equation that there are 2 of this, and you can find out these numbers, and then you can establish the given salt has this much of proportion. So conductivity measurement help you to establish the stoichiometry or the ratio of ions in a given salt. Okay, is it clear to all of you? What kind of electrolyte is this? So what kind of electrolyte is this? This is an electrolyte which is generally referred to as 2,2,3. because basically cation is in 2 proportion, anion is in 3 proportion. If you talk about the, let's say, CaCl2, okay, CaCl2, this is a salt of 1 to 2 proportion, cation in 1 proportion and anion in 2 proportion. So this is the proportion I am referring here. How do you establish this proportion? This is generally established by conductivity measurement, okay, something which you have studied. Okay, that's why I just brought it back. So here also, when you do the conductivity measurement in this solution, you don't get the conductivity due to silver ion, potassium ion and cyanide ion. You get the conductivity due to potassium ion and this whole ion. This is one thing. And qualitatively you can establish the presence of this. So you know that there are only 2 type of entities which are existing in the given solution. Okay, these are simple chemical analysis. Is it clear to all of you? Good. Okay, then now let's move to Werner's experiment and how he established that there is a different set of compound which is existing here in the name of addition compounds, and that is called as coordination compound. So let me discuss his experiment. It was a very interesting experiment, and you know, he did this experiment in such an early time where chemistry was just being established and we were barely able to understand all the nature of bonding, and generally his experiment is praised because of the simplicity. Okay, so you should know that, because as budding scientists, or let's say the students of science, you should know even some of the most prominent facts can be established by simple analysis, but you should know how to do that. Okay, so here is a person called Werner, a very celebrated name in the area of chemistry, Werner. Okay, he prepared a series of these kind of compound. How did he do? Let's say he prepares the series of this compound. Right now I am simply representing a series of compounds, basically addition compounds. Okay, I am referring to right now addition compound. I am not even calling them as coordination compound right now, but let's say they are coordination compound, but I am just generalizing in terms of addition compound. A series of addition compounds of cobalt chloride with valency of 3, cobalt chloride with valency of 3 and ammonia were prepared. Please see, you are taking only 2 substances, okay, solution of 2 substances, and still you are able to prepare variety of compounds under different experimental conditions. Okay, right now I am simply writing their molecular or molecular formula in a very empirical manner as COCl3 6 ammonia. Okay, let's say there is an addition compound which is prepared by mixing cobalt chloride's aqueous solution with ammonia. Okay, and you get a compound, and in this compound it was found that the crystal of this contains 1 cobalt, 3 chloride and 6 ammonia molecules. Okay, so this is one compound, and the color, how do you know that this compound, okay fine, this compound carried a unique color and that was found to be yellow. The crystal of this was found to be yellow. Another compound which was also possible to be prepared by using the same kind of substances, aqueous solution, under different experimental condition, and that was COCl3 5 ammonia. You get only 5 ammonia in this compound in the stoichiometric proportion, and the color of this compound was purple. Another compound, this is the experiment by Werner. Okay, so we are just we are writing everything in classical terms, the way in which he understood. So another compound that also was from the same original sources, cobalt chloride 4 ammonia. Color of this compound was found to be green. Okay, you will get crystal of them. And then one more compound having the same molecular formula, COCl3 4 ammonia, and still different color, and that's violet. Okay, I will come back to this specific case later, but try to see that here you have a series of compounds which are prepared from the same original solutions, cobalt chloride and ammonia, and still have different colors. They gave crystals of different colors under different experimental condition. Okay, in a certain experimental condition means temperature or everything and stoichiometric proportion of the two solution, you get yellow. In some another temperature and stoichiometric proportion of the two, you get purple crystal. In some other condition, you get this, and in some other experimental physical condition, you get violet crystal. Okay, now if you simply try to analyze the proportion of, in the previous experiment I said that not even quantitatively. Right now, suppose if you only have to find out the presence of cyanide in this, you can do some test of cyanide, and we don't get the test of cyanide in this because it seems to be not available as separate entity as cyanide ion, so it doesn't give the test of this. Similarly, silver also does not give you separate test. Now if he analyzes this just to find out, just to establish the stoichiometry of each ion in this. Okay, originally you have taken, let's say, cobalt with the 3+ ion. Cobalt has a valency of 3+. There are 3 chlorine each with valency of Cl-, and ammonia has a valency of 0. This is the neutral molecule. What is the simplest test that you know in the laboratory which can identify the presence of chloride ion? Inorganic analysis. Anybody remembers? Silver nitrate solution, remember? White precipitate. You take 1 mole of this and try to see quantitatively how many moles of silver chloride you get. That will tell you how many chloride ions are there in this. This is also another way, apart from conductivity measurement, which can also establish quantitative numbers of each of these ions. One of the simple, I am talking about right now Werner's experiment, the only simple chemistry based experiment. So quantitative analysis can also be done in terms of estimating the amount of precipitate. The precipitate gave 3 moles of silver chloride molecules. Okay, white precipitate of silver chloride. And if you try to estimate, you find from 1 mole of this substance you get 3 mole of this. If you do the same reaction for this, you get 2 moles of chloride. Okay, if you do the same thing, treat 1 mole equivalent solution of cobalt chloride ammonia. Let's say you do not even know right now this, and you only know the substance which have unique color, that's all. Okay, you get 1 mole of chloride. Here also 1 mole of cobalt chloride 4 ammonia gives 1 mole of silver chloride precipitate. Okay, so please try to understand. Definitely there must be something different about them, where all the chlorine in this case are freely available in the solution and they are able to precipitate silver. Here you have only 2 chlorine ions which are freely available in solution. They are able to precipitate only 2 silver chloride molecules out of 1 mole of, or 1 molecule of this substance, and you get 1 and 1 of this. All right, you can even further, this is one set of experimental data which tells you a lot. See, suppose if all the chlorines were free in aqueous solution, then they all should have given you 3 moles of silver chloride, which you don't get, you get different, number 1. Another thing, you can even do some more experimental studies and try to establish the proportion of electrolytes. For example, when I was talking about the electrolyte here in the previous example, okay, by conductivity measurement you can establish how many type of ions are there in what proportion. What did you get here in case of conductivity measurement? In conductivity measurement, when you do here, you will get 2 of potassium ion, 2 of aluminum ion, 4 of sulfate ion. This will be established. In this case, you will get 1 potassium ion and 1 of this complex ion. Now, if you do the conductivity measurement here also and try to establish the ratio of ions, okay, so ratio of ions, when I say ions means cations and anions, so ratio of ions by conductivity measurement. So here it was found that in this particular case the electrolyte was containing 1 cation, 3 anions. Okay, cation to anion ratio. In this case, it was found this sample contained, the aqueous solution of this contained 1 to 2 cation to anion ratio. In this case, it was found it was 1 to 1 electrolyte, and here also it was 1 to 1 electrolyte. Okay, now the question arises, how do you explain the properties of these and these experimental results? So Werner proposes something much more. Normally our understanding of any salt is that, you know, when you say, for example, you have the idea of valency of a cation and anion, right? For example, when I say what is the valency of what is the valency of, let's say, calcium ion and chlorine ion in calcium chloride, you will immediately say calcium has a valency of 2 or valence of 2, and each chloride has a valency of 1, right? This is the valency. We know that calcium has valency of 2, chloride has valency of 2. So this is the valence. So we know this idea of valence in simple salts like this, 1 valence. In order to explain these experimental results, Werner proposed that there exist 2 different type of valences in these compounds. Okay, and then based on that we will see soon his proposals in detail, but right now, based on all these experimental facts and results and his proposal that there exist 2 different type of valences, he established that the compounds better can be represented in the format written down here. So suppose if I want to represent in actual form, in what form this compound may be existing, so that I can explain all these aspects, and also considering Werner's proposal of another valence, the compound's formula can best be represented as CO NH3 6 close bracket. That means this is one entity by itself, NH3 6, this is one entity by itself, and then Cl3. Okay, this is one molecular formula. For this it can be represented as CO Cl NH3 5 bracket over Cl2. For this it can be represented as CO Cl2 NH3 4 Cl, and for this it can be represented as CO Cl2, exactly same as this, NH3 4 Cl. Okay, please see, in all these compounds we are representing here 2 type of entities, only one cationic entity, one anionic entity. You can see that this everything that is represented inside the bracket is one cation, big cation. Just like in previous case we were referring to here the formation of this one, AgCN twice as one negative ion. This entity can be negative or positive, doesn't matter, but then you have one counter ion which is a simple ion here. Okay, so here is the simple ion which is chloride ion, and that is represented in the as a outer as a negative ion here. Okay, so you can see here. Now you may ask the question, why representing like this? Well, Werner did this in order to explain the formation of these compounds here and to be able to explain the properties here. How he did that? Now we have to consider first his proposal. Okay, there are basically postulates that Werner gave, and we will discuss all of them to understand this. Okay. So this is the proposal, that this is how, if you represent the formula and you create 2 type of negative and positive entities, then we are able to explain these features. Please try to understand here itself. This whole thing is like one anionic species, cationic species, and the counter ions are chloride ions. So there are 3 chloride ions, and the whole of this carries a valency of 3 plus. If you look at this one, there are 2 chloride ion counter ion, so there are 2 Cl minus, and this whole carries a valency of 2 plus. So this gives the proportion of 1 to 3 cation to anion species, and this gives the proportion of 1 to 2 cation to anion proportion, because this whole entity is behaving like one big cation. Okay, in the similar manner, now look at this one. Here you have one Cl and one big cation as plus, entire thing as carrying 1 plus charge. Similarly, if you look at this one, here also the same. So these are 1 to 1. So this result, which is out of conductivity measurement, can be explained definitely if you try to look at the compound's molecular formula represented as if it is made up of two kind of species. One portion, this one is cationic portion, another is anionic portion. Okay, so that is clear. And even this feature can be explained because here now you see that if you consider there are 3 ionizable chloride ion, then you get 3 moles of silver chloride. If you have 2 ionizable chloride ion, that's why you get only 2 moles of silver chloride. Here you have only 1 ionizable chloride, that's why you get 1 mole of chloride. The chloride which are inside the bracket, they are not freely available. Okay, remember this. I was giving you when I was discussing the formation of this addition compound, I said that everything inside the bracket behaves like one entity and it is not freely available as ion into the solution. So you don't get the test of silver ion or cyanide ion here. In the similar manner, here also in the formation of these compound, you don't have the chloride which are inside the bracket, they are not free as separate entity, negative ion. Similarly, cobalt ion is also not freely available. In fact, the metal test will not happen here. So your confirmatory test for cobalt will not happen here because now the whole thing is one entity. Okay, wherever you have come, in this case, if you have taken only cobalt chloride, if you put in water, you get confirmatory test for cobalt separately. But this complex, none of these complex compound will give you cobalt's confirmatory test. This is because cobalt is no more freely available as ion in the aqueous solution. The whole entity is working like one big entity. Okay, make sense here? So now based on this, see right now we are simply taking it as if we are given with this formula. But Werner established these based on not only these results but other thoughts also which are going to come up now. Okay, right now we are trying to, we are taking both approach, like we already know something and then try to establish, and we establish everything from scratch. Okay, so both the approaches are being adopted right now. Now we will see how Werner established this. What was his proposal? See, his proposal, which are known as postulates. Basically, he was the first one to explore the properties of these substances and also be able to explain them, that why the properties of these substances are different. And he pioneered actually this understanding. So he proposed that normally when you consider a salt, any ionic salt, you consider only 2 type of valencies with the metal ion, right? Only 1 type of valency with the metal ion. Like calcium, if you say here, it has only 1 type of valency in the entire salt. But to explain the formation of this compound, Werner proposed that the metal atom or metal ion in a given complex compound carries 2 type of valencies. Okay, so his first proposal. The first proposal is that central metal atom or metal ion or atom. Why I have written both? Because in some of the compounds you will find that metal may have 0 valency also, 0 oxidation number, or in some cases it may have some positive oxidation number, number. Okay, so both are possible in different compounds. So a metal atom or ion in a complex compound, complex means coordinate compound, in a coordinate compound carries 2 types of valences. Okay, so far you only thought that there is only, see, I'm not trying to say a metal ion cannot have varied valency. That's a different idea. Like I said that we know that iron can exist as iron 2 plus also, and iron can exist as iron 3 plus also. So we know that there are 2 different type of valence which are possible with the iron itself, or you call that oxidation number, right? But in a given compound, so from Fe2 plus you will have only FeCl2. From Fe3 plus with Cl you will have only FeCl3. So in this compound there is only one valence. But I am saying that within the compound here there are 2 valences right now existing. Okay, that's the difference you have to be able to appreciate. So there is a different idea here. Within this compound, you have two different valences. One is called as primary valence and another is called as secondary valence. Now, for the proposal, he said that primary valence is same as the primary valence of counter ions. It represents the number of counter ions in the compound, and these ions are ionizable, which are ionizable. Okay. So normally in your book, if you look at in his proposal, Werner originally said that these counter ions are only negative ion. Why? Because he is mainly some of the compounds where in his coordination compounds the counter ion was only chloride ion. Okay, and the big entity was like a positive ion. But today we know there are compounds where you can have another situation, like the example that I gave you here. This compound which is formed here, this complex compound which is formed here, if you look at, the counter ion is positive ion and the complex ion or the coordinate ion is negative ion. So it is another scenario. So don't get confused. I'm just trying to make you cognizant that in the book it is written here that these counter ions which are created, they are mostly negative ion, only negative ion, as if that's the only thing which is possible, but that's not true. Okay, your counter ion are ionizable and they can be both anion or cation. Okay, right now I'm referring to counter ion, which are ions attached to the complex ion. There are two ions here. One ion we are referring to as complex ion and another as simple counter ion. Okay, so when you put this in water, you get the two separated. Okay, for example, if you put this compound in water, you get 1 plus charge on this entire and Cl minus, the two ions, cation and anion. Okay, all right. So this is one valence which is simple to be understood. Okay, but there is another valence which is referred to as secondary valence. And that represents something else. Metal has another kind of linkages with some other groups or ions also. For example, in this compound we can see there is 1 Cl and 5 ammonia. They are connected or linked with this cobalt here. Okay, this is what is called as secondary valence. Primary valence in this compound is 2 Cl, which are outside, correct? So for this compound the primary valence will be 2 Cl, but the secondary valence will be 1 Cl and 5 ammonia. For this compound the primary valence is 3 Cl and secondary valence is 6. Basically 6 is a number. Valence means number, but it is created by ammonia. And in this compound you can see the primary valence is 1, and which is satisfied by 1 Cl, but the secondary valence is also 6, and that is satisfied by 4 ammonia and 2 Cl here. Same is for this also. So this secondary valence has the idea that it is the linkage which is formed with the metal by the group or the ions, and that is non-ionizable. So whatever is inside this bracket, represented inside this bracket, that will not be ionized when you put this substance in aqueous solution. Okay, what will be ionized? You will have 1 charge plus here and Cl minus. This will be ionized. In this case you will have 2 plus charge and 2 Cl minus ionized. Okay, like this. In this case you will have 3 plus charge of this 1 big cation and 3 Cl minus ions ionized. Okay, like that. Let me remove this one. So I'm trying to say that the ionizable valency is called as primary valence, which is similar what you understood earlier also in your basic understanding of metal compound. But in coordination compound you have another valency which is called secondary valency, and it is non-ionizable. So the secondary valence is non-ionizable. It's a non-ionizable valency. Non-ionizable. Okay, that means there is something much more, and the linkage must be stronger than your ionic bonding, correct? It's the simple fact that also comes here, that whatever ionizes, that is a ionic bonding, and the covalent bonding is, sorry, not covalent, but any kind of, let's say I don't want to name it now, with whatever kind of bonding that these entities are linked to this metal, okay, in this bracket here, that must be different from this ionic valency, ionic charge or ionic bonding. So that's the idea here. Secondary valence is non-ionizable, and it is satisfied by satisfied means what is linked with. So they could be ion, okay, or they could be neutral molecule also. Neutral molecule. You will see the examples. Okay, for example, about these example, at least in this series of compound itself, you can see that there are 6 ammonia, all of them are neutral. In this case, there is 1 Cl and 5 ammonia. So 5 are neutral molecule and 1 is a negative ion that is linked to cobalt. Here you have 2 negative ion and 4 ammonia, like that kind of thing. So it could be a ion, or it could be a neutral molecule, or both together, or both together also, both kind of, or both kind. Okay, so it depends upon which compound, which coordination compound you are talking about. Okay, now one more addition to this is the secondary valence. Now you can realize that it represents the number of linkages or number of bonds. Linkage means bonds also, which are non-ionizable. This number of non-ionizable bonding or linkages, which is called secondary valence, is also referred to as coordination number, is also referred to as, because now onwards in modern terms we will not talk too much in terms of these primary valence, secondary valence, but we will talk more in terms of modern terms, and that is what is referred to as coordination number. Okay, and in general it is abbreviated as Cn. In book sometime you will find that. So what is coordination number here? You can see in all these compounds of cobalt, the coordination number is fixed, which is 6 here total, 6 here, and 6 here, 6 here. By the way, right now we are taking these groups, or let's say ions, they are forming only one coordination bond with the cobalt here. But later we are going to discuss the nature of these groups which form this coordination bond, and there will be where even a single group will form multiple bonds. We will see that soon. Okay, so don't worry about that. So coordination number is simply the total number of secondary valences. Okay, so, or in general, the total number of linkages, or in general bonds, formed by secondary valence. Okay, total number of linkages formed by secondary valence with the metal, with the central metal atom or ion. Okay, fine. Then there is further addition to this, a certain, this, see, in Werner times, just imagine in this very early time where hardly people knew much about the structures of the compound, even in the normal compound. For example, methane ka structure tetrahedral hai, yeah, like those kind of structures. Okay, that those things were hardly well understood. But even in that time, Werner was so sharp to even talk about the structure of the complex compound. Please see, whatever is there inside this coordination entity, this whole thing which is represented inside the bracket is called as coordination entity. I will write down again. And this whole thing seem to be like fixed in terms of structure geometry. Why? Because all these groups which are attached with the metal, and when they are more than one, please see, they don't ionize. That means they will orient themselves in space in a certain way. Last year when you were studying this chemical bonding, you studied something called as valence shell electron pair repulsion theory. Remember that? It was such a simple idea which simply said that in any compound, for example, if we talk about methane, methane forms 4 bonds with 4 hydrogens like this, okay, and then there are bonding pair of electrons. So these bonding pair of electron, they tend to orient themselves away from each other as far apart as possible. Why? Because there is a huge repulsion, correct? So all of them, when they end up repelling each other strongly, then, and they cannot fly away from carbon, right? They are attached to carbon. तो क्या होगा, like as if, like, you know, they will orient themselves with the in such a structure which will minimize the repulsion, and that leads to tetrahedral geometry for methane. We know that, correct? So in the similar manner here also, all these groups or ions which are attached by valence to the metal atom or metal ion, they also tend to orient themselves in a certain way, and this ends up with a certain structure. Okay, so like in normal compounds, simple compounds, you have a structure formation. Wherever you have covalent bonding, you have a structure formation. Here also in coordination compound, the secondary the groups which are attached through secondary valence, okay, the groups or ions attached through secondary valence orient themselves such as to minimize the repulsion between them. What will happen if this is so? This will lead to very specific structure. This leads to specific structure for coordination entity. What is coordination entity? I just said anything that is inside the bracket where you have a metal and the groups or ions which are attached by secondary valence. This whole part of a complex compound is called as coordination entity. See, this part is simple. We are not, in whole of this chapter you will see that we will not be discussing this part, because this part is simple. This is simply ionizable. We don't have anything to do with this, because this is something which we, you know, this is not something which is necessary to explore, because it is an ionic part and we know that it is an ionic bonding, and that doesn't decide much about this whole of the property of the complex compound, because it simply dissociate, hai na? So much of the property of the whole of the complex compound is decided by this part which is represented inside the bracket, where you have the metal and all the groups or ions which are attached by secondary valence. ठीक है ना? So I am talking about this part only. This part, whatever you have inside, all these groups which are attached with the metal, they orient themselves in a way, they end up forming a certain specific structure. So now please see, if you have a certain specific structure by the coordination entity, and this inside this coordination entity you have a metal with a certain coordination number. So there is a direct relation. This shows the direct relation. This is directly related to coordination number of central metal atom or ion. So 6 groups will orient only in a certain way, right, in space. Suppose if there are 4, they will orient in different way. Okay, so whatever number of total groups that you have here or ions you have that are attached to this central metal atom through secondary valence, they will orient in a certain way. That means coordination number, जिसको हमने अभी यहाँ पे देखा था secondary valence जो total number होता है, so that is related directly to this, and this was something established independent by him. So here is a proposal that suppose if you have a compound where you have a coordination number, for example in this compound CONH3 6 3 plus, coordination number of cobalt here is actually cobalt का charge है इसके अंदर, but anyway I will not talk about it now. Cobalt coordination number for cobalt is 6 because there are 6 linkages with this cobalt through these groups, okay, or the ions which are forming the secondary valence, ठीक है ना, and this will lead to octahedral complex. Why octahedral complex? Because suppose if I put metal here at the center and if I try to put the 6 of the ligands, let's say, okay, there is a term which we are going to discuss soon. All these groups which are attached to the central metal atom, they are called ligands. I'm right now, don't worry about that again. Right now I'm representing them by L. Let's say whatever they are, whether they are ion or neutral molecule, let's say I'm representing them by L. So you have 4 of them like this and 2 of them above and below the plane of this this square planar complex, square planar geometry, okay. So you can see that this geometry is called as octahedral geometry. If you connect all of these and try to just connection in the sense not the bonding but just outer periphery, you will find that there are 4 faces which are formed above and 4 faces which are formed below. Because if you just take up one portion, it looks like a square pyramidal. There is a square here and then there is a pyramid here. Suppose if you connect all these L's together, okay, so there are 4 faces, one phase, second phase, third phase and 4 phases, similarly 4 down. So this is like a octahedral geometry. So octahedral geometry is possible because there is a central metal atom which is carrying coordination number of 6. Similarly, you may have another geometry possible. For example, if you take nickel carbonyl, this is another complex, okay, this is a complex here. Coordination number here of nickel in this particular case is 4 because there are 4 groups which are attached. Sorry, NiCl4, CO4. Carbonyl is this is a carbonyl, means carbon monoxide molecule which is attached to nickel. So coordination number here is 4 and the geometry of this is established as tetrahedral. So there is a tetrahedral geometry around nickel for 4 lithiums. 4 ligands, okay. So coordination number 4 means this one, but there is another possibility of coordination number 4 having a different geometry also, and that is there are complexes of that kind. For example, PtCl4 2 minus, okay, and this has a coordination number of platinum here is 4 here also, but this will not exhibit tetrahedral geometry but it will exhibit square planar geometry. Now why is that? You don't worry about that right now, but I am just trying to establish certain fact, a relation between coordination number and the geometry. This is a tetrahedral TD, okay, tetrahedral is generally abbreviated as TD, okay. This is a square planar ligands. So this is like a triangular geometry. This is like a plane of triangle. Suppose if you imagine if you are connecting this, and above and below you can have the ligands, and this will lead to the geometry which is like triangular bipyramidal geometry, okay. Remember this PCl5 kind of molecule, if you remember last year you studied, you have this kind of geometry. So there are complexes of this time, but right now I am simply trying to establish the fact there is a relation between coordination number and geometry. Trigonal bipyramidal. There is a similarly with coordination number 5, another geometry is possible which is square pyramidal, okay. You may have metal, then there are 4 ligands in a plane, just like in octahedral you saw, okay. This is like a plane, then only one ligand above the plane. So if you connect all of them, you will get here, this is like a square pyramidal, okay. So I am trying to establish the fact that there is a direct relation between the coordination number of the central metal atom and the specific structure. Why is that so? Because all the groups or ions which are attached to the central metal in a given complex compound, they will orient in such a way so that minimize the repulsion. This will invariably lead to certain specific structure, correct? So he proposed this. This was a part of his proposal theory. That means he was successfully also able to not only explore the complex bond, the complex nature of bonding inside this coordination entity, but he was also able to talk about the structure of the complex entity. Okay, at that point of time, structure is a very important thing, right? Okay, so these things, these are certain aspects of his some of the important aspect of Werner's theory of coordination compound. Now let me tell you right now, for us what is important is, we all of these are important for us to know, because we are going to use them as vocabulary in our discussions everywhere. So get familiarized slowly with all these things. For example, just try to see you understand very clearly the distinction between primary and secondary valency. Primary valency is the one which is ionizable, which we are not, this is actually not of a concern for coordination compound. Okay, this does not talk about the coordination compound. Basically it is not a relevant thing to talk about the properties of coordination compound, but in a coordination, this is more like a counter charge. Okay, the charge which needs to be balanced by counter ion, that's all it represents. Secondary valence is important. Secondary valence is the one which decides how many of the groups or ions are attached to the central metal atom, and hence they also decide, so that is called coordination number, and that also decides the structure of the complex compound. From one compound to another compound of the same metal atom or ion, the primary valence may be different, but the secondary valence for a given metal is generally fixed. Okay, metal atom or ion is fixed. Now let me represent any of the complex compound. For example, let me take here, these are all examples of various examples of coordination compounds. Okay, what is the difference between them? One thing which one can very easily realize is that the charge which is carried by coordination entity. Okay, in all of them, whatever is represented inside this bracket, in all of them here, and in this case it is just the whole thing by bracket itself, these are referred to as coordination entity or coordination sphere. Both are same. Okay, स्फीयर का सिंपली मीनिंग कुछ ज्यादा नहीं है, बट इट इज लाइक अ सर्टेन स्फेरिकलिटी अबाउट द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ दिस, दैट्स ऑल. But everything which is represented inside this bracket, so what are the things inside the bracket? You have a metal of the complex compound. Remember, in your coordination compounds, you have a metal always. There is a central metal atom around which you have the secondary the groups which are attached by the secondary valence or the secondary type of, or the coordination bonding, correct? So these two together, they form the entire entity which is called as coordination entity or coordination sphere. Okay, now this is all it is important for us. That's why it has been just isolated in terms of calling it as coordination entity or coordination sphere, because this is just the counter ion. Okay. So what is the difference? In this also there is a coordination entity here, in this also there is a coordination entity here. Okay, and what is the difference between this compound and this compound? Ammonia 6 3 plus, and you will get 3 Cl minus ions. Okay, so basically you will get these as ions from this. If you put this one in water or in aqueous solution, the ions that you are going to get are 4 potassium ions, and you will get one big FeCN6 4 minus a negative ion. You can see that this is, so these are just the counter ion. You see that? So now you remember that in Werner's theory, he prepared the compounds where you only have a negative type of counter ion, but I told you at that point of time you also have compounds where the counter ion can also be positive, where the coordination entity becomes a negative ion. So this kind of coordination compounds are referred to as positive coordination entity, and this is a negative coordination entity. This compound is the negative coordination entity. And look at this one. On the top of the bracket, there is no charge mentioned, that means zero charge, and there is no counter ion, that means this must be neutral coordination entity. Okay, so basically you can have a positive coordination entity, you may have a negative coordination entity, you can even have a neutral coordination entity. It depends upon which complex compound you are talking about. Now in all of these complex compound, there is something called as central metal atom, or it could be ion also. If you look at here, cobalt, which is a metal ion here, because we will see that why we are calling this as metal ion. If you calculate the oxidation number of cobalt here, okay, so in the first example, if you look at here, the central metal atom, which is the part of this coordination entity, its oxidation number you can calculate very easily. We need to find out for cobalt in ammonia 6,3 plus. So we need to find out for cobalt, let me call it as X. There are 6 of ammonia and each one is with the 0 oxidation number. So the total of this and this should be equal to 3 plus, and this tells you therefore X is equal to 3 plus. So the charge on oxidation number of cobalt in this case 3 plus. Okay, so this is how you can identify even the oxidation number. So in this case the coordination entity, in this coordination entity here in this complex, cobalt is an ion. Please see, that's how you can very easily tell. If you look at this one in the second example, oxidation number of iron in the second example, let's find out that. You can see that the total charge on this entity is 4 minus. Okay, you can see that when it dissociates, it will be 4 minus. So you have FeCN6 4 minus. You need to find out for, let's say, iron, which you do not know. There are 6 cyanides. 6 cyanide. Each cyanide is cyanide minus. Cyanide is a negative ligand. So 1 minus, and the total is 4 minus or minus 4. Therefore, oxidation number for iron here is going to be how much? If this goes on this side, it will be 2 plus. Okay, so X is 2 plus. So iron here is basically 2 plus. Cobalt here was 3 plus. Okay, these are oxidation number of the central metal ion or the metal ion in these complexes. Let's take the third example, which is here, NiCO4, and there is no net charge on the compound, which is 0. So Ni carbonyl 4, 0 charge here. So nickel, if you look at this one, let's say X plus 4, carbon monoxide is a neutral molecule, correct? So 0 charge, and the whole thing is 0, and therefore X is equal to 0. So nickel here is not an ion, but it is existing as an atom. Please see. So nickel is 0 charge. So you can now realize that in a given complex compound, a metal atom, there can be metal atom or there can be metal ion also. It depends upon which compound you have. So in that, you should be able to calculate this oxidation number on the central metal atom. And now I have worked out for you, so you should know how to find it out. Okay. So there is a central metal atom inside the coordination entity, and inside the coordination entity, another important species which lies is called as ligand. Now I am going to define these entities. Whatever groups or ions that are attached to the central metal atom, they are called as in general ligand. But before I go further, I would like to calculate one more example for you. COCl NH3 5. Okay. So if you put this one in water, what you are going to get? You are going to get here this whole thing as 2 plus, because there are 2 Cl minus which will be released, and therefore to find out the oxidation number in this particular case, let's say X, there is 1 Cl. Cl is minus negative ion, so there is 1 minus. There are 5 ammonia, so you have 0 on each one of them, and the total of this entire should be is equal to 2 plus, because this will release out 2Cl minus and then this big ion. So this whole thing is plus 2, and this gives you x is equal to, you can see this will also give you x is equal to plus 3. So in this case also cobalt is 3 plus charge. Okay, is it clear to all of you? Moving further, I want to now talk about the another important entity, and that's called ligand. So let me simply say this: ions or groups or molecules linked to the central metal atom or ion inside the coordination entity are referred to as ligands. So ligands are of different types. In a simplest term, first of all, your ligand can be an ion. It could be an ion. For example, you may have Cl halogens, negative ions of halogen. It could be Br minus, I minus, etc., etc. Or it could be a group of atoms forming an ion like NO2 minus or thiocyanide like this. Okay, so there could be negative ion like this, or it could be oxalate. Okay, I will write it down, oxalate. I am just writing oxalate 2 minus. Okay, even this is an ion. So there could be negative ion which can act as a ligand, or that could also be a neutral molecule. Neutral molecule. So these are various types of ligands. It could be neutral molecule like H2O, neutral molecule like ammonia, neutral molecule like ethylene diamine. Right, let me write it only En. I will talk about this later, but right now I am writing only as En. EDTA. Sorry, EDTA is not this one, but EDTA belong here. EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetate 4 minus. Okay, so there could be positive, there could be neutral molecule which can also act as ligand. There could be negative ion. You can notice one thing: in all the negative ion, anyway there is a possibility of donating a pair of electron to form the coordination bond, because they all have extra electrons, so they can share a pair of electron. In case of neutral molecule, it is the lone pair which exists on these atoms which are like oxygen or nitrogen, correct? In all of them you will find that there will be one or two, one at least these kind of atom which carries the lone pair of electron, and that is what is responsible for coordination bonding. So coordination bonding generally is formed with the metal by the ligands, and the ligand can be negative or they could be neutral molecules. Okay, so here are few of these general example. Now how many bond does a ligand form? Depending upon that, we can see that there are complex type of ligands also, or simple ligand. So there is a category of ligand which form only, let's say, one bond. For example, you can see that all these these four will form only one bond at least with a metal. Okay, but this can form two bond, this can form four bond, more than that. I will show you how. Now here in the neutral molecule, this can form one bond. One water bond molecule forms only one bond. One ammonia forms one bond. Ethylene diamine will form two bond. How? I will show you. So let me first say that there are ligands which form only one coordination or coordinate bond. I'm already using the term bond, which is supposed to be used later, but let's say coordinate linkage with the central metal atom or ion. They are referred to as unidentate. unidentate. Dent word comes as if like, you know, something is in denting. In simple word, it is like, you know, it's forming a linkage by attaching. Okay, so unidentate ligand, these are referred as unidentate ligands. Okay, among the category of unidentate ligand, there is a special category of ligands which is called as ambidentate ligand, a type of unidentate ligands which can attach to the metal through different atoms of its. For example, you can see that chlorine just by itself, so there is only one type of atom which will attach to the metal. In case of water also, we know it is the oxygen only which will form the attaching side. In case of ammonia, it is only the nitrogen which will form the attaching side, correct? But look at the molecule like NO2. In case of NO2 can form the bond with metal either through this oxygen or through nitrogen. Okay, so it can attach to the metal either through nitrogen. Let's say if nitrogen is the one which is attaching to the metal by, okay, the bond is being represented now by arrow. Okay, so it can form in two different ways the bonding with the central metal atom. One way is this, the another way will be through oxygen. Okay, so these kind of ligand, although they are forming only one bond with the metal, but do you see that they can attach to the metal in two different ways, and this whenever you know, this is not same as this bonding, this will lead to different property, this will lead to different property. So these kind of ligand which can attach to the central metal atom in two different ways or multiple different ways, they are called as ambidentate ligand, but they are still unidentate ligand because they are still attaching only through formation of one bond. In similar manner, you have thiocyanate which can also attach to metal through SCN, means through sulfur, or it can also attach to the metal through nitrogen, NCS. Okay, so these two are different type of bondings, basically different, the bonding with different properties. Both are different right now. Okay, although both coordination, but the combining atom of the group is different. So we should consider that they will lead to different properties. Okay, so here is something that I have told you, that there is something called as ambidentate ligand which are same as unidentate ligand, but they will attach to the metal atom in different ways. Okay, so this is ambidentate still belonging to the class of unidentate ligands. Now let's look at some more another type of ligands where we will have different possibilities. Okay, for example, a simplest of the higher possibility is didentate or bidentate ligand, where, for example, there is a molecule called ethane diamine, which is CH2, and here you got NH2, and here also you got NH2. This molecule, either you call it as ethane as per IUPAC nomenclature, ethane 1,2 diamine. See, nomenclature correct, diamine, it's a diamine, and ethane 1,2 diamine, or ethylene diamine. This is like a common name. They are abbreviated as generally as EN, small e, small n. Now how many bonds it can form? It can form, please see, there are two nitrogen sides and both can form the bond with the metal. So I will show you, there are not just this molecule, but there are molecule where you have more than just two nitrogen. We can say that didentate is also like a polydentate. What I am referring is generally polydentate ligands. So didentate is just one of that. Okay, didentate is just one of that polydentate ligands. And another important ligand which is again given in your syllabus is ethylene diamine tetraacetate. The structure, it is like CH2 CH2, again ethylene, you see it is ethylene diamine, like here you have nitrogen similarly like this, but then on the nitrogen the two hydrogens are replaced by acetate group CH3 COO minus, CH3 COO minus, and here also on this nitrogen CH3 COO minus, CH3 COO minus. Actually it is a ion which is derived from ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. All these, if you place here hydrogen, then it is acetic acid, correct? Ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid. So but generally for us the important thing is that it is a negative ion. This is a neutral ion, but this is a negative ion, you can see that. Okay, why it is negative? Because these are the parts which will be forming the bond with the metal. But you can see there are 4 negative ions, there are 2 nitrogens also. Just see the magnitude of complexity with which EDTL forms the bond with a single metal. So with the single metal, just to show you, it leads a very unique structure. We will see that later, I am not showing now. In this case the ligand will form the bond with the metal like this, so that's why it is didentate. Okay, so the single metal may have bonding with other ligand also, but single En forms 2 coordination bond. Okay, in case of this molecule, this ion or this ligand, which is ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, it forms the bond with the metal through 4 acetate ions. Okay, not just like in the whole of this molecule will not lie in this one side or one corner of this whole structure. I'm not writing down the structure right now, but actually speaking they organizes in a certain way that it gives a very typical structure. We will be anyway learning that later. So you can see that through 2 nitrogen atoms and 4 of these acetate ions, so it is a hexadentate ligand. It is a hexadentate ligand. It's an example of hexadentate ligand. Okay, and it's called as abbreviate. I will okay, ethylene diamine tetraacetate. Okay, and there is no gap here, you can see that everything is connected. And always remember, you should be careful about this M thing. Wherever you have organic amine, it is single M. Wherever you have ammonia, it is double M, right? You should know this. Never make mistake into this. This is acetate ion and it has got valency of 4 minus, so it is abbreviated as EDTA, 4 minus. Okay, it's a negative ligand and you have valency of 4. So in the complex structure it is represented as abbreviated as capital EDTA, capital. Here it is small en. Okay, oh, all right. Okay, so another bidentate ligand also, apart from neutral molecule, there is a oxalate ion from oxalic acid, derived from oxalic acid, and it's called oxalate ion. So this is a neutral molecule. Like another didentate ligand is COOH or COO minus, COO minus. This is oxalic acid from, if you put hydrogen here then it is oxalic acid, but if you remove hydrogen then it is oxalate ion. And oxalate ion is also bidentate ligand. Oxalate ion, it's also bidentate ligand. It can form the bond, 2 bonds with the metal, and it is abbreviated as OX generally. small ox, not capital Ox but small ox. Okay, in the book you will find it is written as small ox. So you know this one, this is En, this is Ox, and this is EDTA 4 minus. Now there is a typicality about these kind of ligand where you have multi-dentate coordination bond formation happening simultaneously. Okay, and you can notice that all of them, whether it is didentate, tridentate, tetradentate, pentadentate or hexadentate, all of them end up forming a closed structure. You can see that here, even in this case. तो ये भी जो मेटल के साथ में यहाँ पे जब ये कोऑर्डिनेशन बॉन्ड बनाएगा तो इस तरह से दो, यू कैन सी दैट ऑल ऑफ देम एंड अप फॉर्मिंग अ रिंग स्ट्रक्चर. Wherever you have polydentate ligand forming the structure with the metal, they end up forming a closed loop. There could be one loop or multiple loop also, but all of them end up forming a loop kind of structure. Now you will realize and study later, little later, when we are almost completing this chapter, that this actually adds a lot of stability to the complex compound. There is a name to these closed loop. This name is called as chelate structure, chelation. This process is called as chelation, where you have multidentate ligand forming a closed loop with the metal is referred to as chelation. So there is a process called chelation. Spelling is CHELATION. It is generally pronounced as chelation. Some people call it as chelation. That's fine. तो chelation जो है, it refers to formation of a closed loop structure due to the formation of coordination bonding by a multidentate ligand with the metal. Okay, what is the advantage of this? It adds chelation. Basically, I am referring to chelation, adds a lot of stability to the complex. Suppose this is the complex compound. Okay, if you put this in water, now water in aqueous solvent, this is dissociated. So this is the complex negative ion that is derived, sorry, positive ion that is derived. Wherever we say stability of a complex, it is always about the coordination entity. Here the 6 bonds are formed by 3 En molecule. So coordination number here is twice the number of didentate ligand. In this case, so it will turn out to be 6. It is as simple as that. Coordination number is simply the total number of coordination bonds formed with the metal. Unidentate hai, each one is forming 1 bond, so there are 6 bonds. So coordination number here is 6. So this molecule and this molecule differs only in terms of this. Just to give you the feel, this will again come back in your isomerism. Cobalt actually is it will lead to octahedral geometry, where ethylene diamine is now connected somewhere like in an octahedral geometry with cobalt. So I can attach one En in between, let's say these 2 bonds. I can attach one En like this one, okay, and one En like this one. Are you able to visualize that there is an octahedral geometry? The bonds are represented by blue line. Normally the bonds are represented by arrow, okay, from the bonds are represented by arrow from the ligand towards the metal, like this. But generally the arrow sometimes is ignored to be mentioned. In your book you might have seen they generally have not written down arrow, but that's fine, understandable, but mostly the coordination bonds are referred by arrow. So this is an octahedral complex. Now if you try to draw the octahedral complex of this, of course there is a charge on this entire thing. With charge it is represented like this. If you try to see the structure of this is also octahedral complex, where NH2CH3, 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 and one above NH2CH3 and one below NH2CH3. This is also octahedral complex with the same valency as this one, 3 plus. Okay, if you want you can refer the bonding with arrow. So the difference is only in terms of looping, the chelation. You can see there is a chelation here, but in other case there is no chelation here in this case. Okay, try to connect and then see that this will look like an octahedral complex. Okay, so there is no chelation here because and everything is similar. See, number of atoms are same except that in this case the 2 hydrogen will be missing because of the bonding between the carbon and carbon. But should that really matter? Just so much of stability is achieved in these complexes. So actually speaking, it is not about the molecular change. So it is attributed to the chelation part, not to the change of the molecule. Change in the molecule is very, very minor. That should not lead to what we know as enormous stability which is achieved. So this is highly stable. This complex is highly stable compared to this one. This one is highly stable compared to this one. So the reason is only because of chelation. The reason you will know. Now if you increase the multiplicity of the bonding by a single ligand, that means you are increasing the more possibility of chelation by the single ligand. For example, this is the best example, ethylene diamine tetraacetate. It forms so many loops with the same metal by a single ligand. So this adds up enormous stability further. And with any metal, whenever EDTA forms the bond, it forms a very strong bond. And EDTA is one of the reagent which is used to find out the hardness of water, because it is very easily it can chelate with calcium and magnesium. It is also used to remove the scale, which is generally the calcium magnesium salt on the vessel surface. So this is what I wanted to talk about as chelation. Important part is that chelation adds to lot of stability. This is something that you must appreciate. Okay, and here I have taken the example also to explain the same thing. All right, so this is all about the brief idea. And just to add one more to your vocabulary, there is a term called homoleptic complex compounds or coordination compounds, and heteroleptic complex compound. All the coordination compound where you have only one type of ligands attaching to the metal. For example, cobalt ammonia 6 3 plus. Only one type of ligand, they are all referred to as homoleptic. And if you have more than one type of ligands attaching to the metal, for example, in case of CO, Cl, NH3, 5, and its valency will be 2 plus. Okay, so this is a heteroleptic, because in more than one type of ligand means it is called as heteroleptic complex. So this is the basic difference.